Welcome, everyone, to this special 3-hour event. Genocide in Palestine is a global feminist issue, protecting the web of life. In the Maternal Gift Economy Breaking Through series, hosted by the International Feminists for the Gift Economy. We are very, very happy that you've joined us today. I'm Letecia Layson. I will give short introductions and turn the mic over to Genevieve and Maria Suarez. Our guests today and special speakers are Lila, Sharif, Pilar, Emitxin, Jodie Evans, and our responders are Paola, Melchiori, and Peggy Antrobus. This morning I found out that we have one other special guest who Maria will introduce during the session. I will introduce all the speakers, our main speakers, and then do short bios for those women in our network. Dr. Lila Sharif is a feminist Palestinian creative writer, researcher, and educator based in the Phoenix area. Her research focuses on indigenous ontologies, race, ethnicity, Arab and Muslim experiences in the United States, food studies, and global decolonial feminism. She is a co-founding member of the Palestinian Feminist Collective, as well as the Critical Refugee Studies Collective. She has published poetry, books, academic articles, and public essays. She is currently co-editing a decolonial guidebook of historic Palestine forthcoming with Duke, and is completing a book on decolonial politics embedded in Palestine's ancestral olive traditions, forthcoming with the University of Minnesota Press. Sharif holds dual PhDs in ethnic studies and sociology. Pilar Emitxin is a feminist graphic artist from Cordoba, Argentina, citizen of the universe, illustrator, and graphic designer. She works with social organizations, assemblies, feminist, and independent media outlets throughout Laya, Latin America, original Native people, and the global South, focusing mainly on feminist, anti-extractivist, childhood defense, and international solidarity graphics. She is currently, as of 2023, one of the administrators of the International Solidarity Feminist Network with Palestine, the Global South Feminist Assembly for Palestine, composed of over 600 worldwide solidarity initiative, collectives, and organizations. Jodie Evans is a lifelong peace activist, social justice activist, and co-founder of Code Pink, Women for Peace. She was in Jerry Brown's cabinet when he served as governor of California in the 1970s, ran his Senate campaign in 1982 and his revolutionary 1992 campaign for president. She has led citizen diplomacy delegations to Iran, the Gaza Strip, Yemen, and Afghanistan, and has published 2 books, Stop the Next War Now, Effective Responses to Terrorism, and Twilight of Empire. She founded a campaign at Code Pink, Cultivating a Local Peace Economy, to address the need to change culture from a war economy culture to a peace economy culture if we want to achieve peace and justice, to a giving, sharing, caring, thriving relational economy from an extractive, destructive, oppressive economy. Our responders, Paola Melchiori is a feminist theorist, activist, and writer, author of books, producer of videos, articles on feminist issues. She created nationally and international free spaces of critical thinking based on the model of free universities. You'll be able to read all of the bios on the website. Peggy Antrobus is a Caribbean feminist. Since the mid-1970s, she's been involved in programs to advance women's rights, first in the structure of government, later within the academy, and now as a feminist-led global women's movement. Our hostesses, Maria Suarez Toro, is a feminist journalist and an activist in defense of human rights and an educator. She was born in Puerto Rico and has been a resident of San Jose, Costa Rica for close to 50 years. She was the co-director of the Feminist International Radio Fire from 1991 to 2011, which she co-founded. Genevieve Vaughan is an independent researcher who lives part-time in Italy and part-time in Texas. She created the multicultural all-woman activist foundation for a compassionate society that had its life from 1987 to 2005 and founded the Temple of Sekhmet in the Nevada desert in 1992, which still is ongoing today. She created the network, the International Feminists for a Gift Economy, and she is the reason we are here today. So thank you all. I'm very excited to turn the mic over and get this program started for this wonderful day of information that we can actually do the work that needs doing. Thank you very much. Maria and Jen, I'm turning it over to you now.
Welcome, all of you. I'm so happy that you're here. And I think it's very important to have these North-South meetings, South-North meetings, especially among women, and especially now about the genocide in Palestine. And this is a moment of terrible crisis, environmentally, as well as in our humanity, a crisis of humanity, because we have contradicted the maternal way of caring for each other, and that continues life throughout the centuries. And this has been targeted at a people who are a gentle people that have not have any reason to have been oppressed in the way they have over decades. So women all over the world need to unite against this terrible genocide. And I just wanted to mention the woman who was recently killed, the Turkish American woman, Asinur Agi, and her sacrifice that was so unnecessary, but has really shaken the world. And I wanted just to mention something I read that a friend of hers said, which is by this man named Sam Chesneau of the Seattle-based Muslim organization Wasat. He said, "She reminds us to make peace with death and rather fear a life of apathy, of choosing safety at the expense of our beliefs and our humanity." And I know all of you who are here have chosen that in the many ways that you act in the world. So thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate very much what you're going to say and all of the discussion we're going to have today.
Genevieve. On behalf of the many initiatives that are here today and the many that we know are struggling around the world in solidarity with Palestine, I want to express to you how honored I am to be able to meet with all of you, our listeners, our viewers, and also the speakers, the commentators, and the organizers of this session in this very moment when it is so important to be active, activated, and present everywhere in every corner of the world as we are. It is also very important that we can talk to each other and bring about the perspectives that oftentimes, and as a Central American, I can say that because of all the conflicts that we have accompanied since the 70s as elder feminists, also with all of the generations, where it has been a lifelong struggle to be able to combine successfully the relationship between the oppression of our peoples, the occupation, the apartheid, and what it has to do with the women and the children. And after 50 years of that, when I read with the Palestinian Women's Declaration, the reproductive genocide, it really brought together the 60 years of trying to understand the deepest level of that connection. And that is what we also have to highlight today, because although right now it is not even necessary to prove that there is genocide against Palestinians, it is very important that we understand the dimensions of it that we see every day in the voices of the people, of the children, of the women, of their husbands, of their compañeros, to understand the level and the cruelty of the genocide that is happening in Palestine. I want to thank Lila for being here and all of us who are accompanying her and her people in this struggle for starting. So with that, I will start with Lila, who will be our first presenter, and thank her for the perspective that she's going to bring to us. And welcome everybody. Lila.
Thank you so much, Maria. So thank you. So grateful to be here with you all. Because I'm an educator and this is how I roll, I do have some slides. So I'm going to share my screen. So a few things I wanted to discuss today with you, just to help me organize my thoughts, because the topic is so large. So we're talking today, of course, about reproductive genocide in Gaza. This is a statement that I co-wrote with the Palestinian Feminist Collective. You're welcome to see the statement for yourself. It is available on our website, PalestinianFeministCollective.com. Essentially, we condemn what we name as reproductive genocide in a statement. It's also something you can find on our social media. Reproductive justice, as we define it as a Palestinian collective, which is an intergenerational feminist collective composed of feminist Palestinians, primarily here on Turtle Island, but all over the world, also in the homeland. We understand reproductive justice as something that upholds the right to bodily autonomy for individuals, families, and communities in all aspects of decision-making and practices related to sex and reproduction, including the right to have or not have children, the right to give birth free from oppression, exploitation, and violence, and the right to create and raise families in safe and healthy environments with sustainable access to food, water, electricity, and medicine. Reproductive genocide includes many forms, as we are witnessing in real time in the Gaza Strip. It includes mass incarceration. It's not limited to the Gaza Strip. We're seeing this in the West Bank primarily. It includes psychological warfare and collective punishment, the practice of ethnic cleansing, gendered and sexual violence of women and girls by an occupying state or force, in this case, the state of Israel, gendered and sexual violence of men and boys, also by an occupying state or force, and forced conditions of unlivability. It also means the desecration of the human body, both of the living and in the dead, Israel has a unique practice of not only incarcerating children, but keeping them indefinitely, even after they die, and sometimes in mass morgues in prisons until they carry out their sentence. So post-mortem detention is something that is happening in Palestine, also within reproductive genocide. What we have to understand about reproductive genocide is that it's part of a larger struggle for Palestinian indigenous people over our land and our sovereignty. It is based on this notion that settler colonialism is a structure that's inherently anti-life, anti-environmental life, ecological life, but also human life. And it's a tool for erasure. So it's something used deliberately in order to target women and the future. So we see this happening. This did not begin on October 7th, of course. This began around the Nakba. The Nakba is an Arabic word that means catastrophe. And it's both an event that occurred over the course of 2 years, 1947 to 1949, with the official declaration of Israeli statehood on Palestinian indigenous lands. But it's also an ongoing process of which reproductive genocide is a huge feature. During this time, 500 plus Palestinian villages were exterminated. Israel's statehood was established on the ruins of these villages. And again, this is an event and a process of dispossession. These images are iconic in that they illustrate what the Nakba means. It's a moment and an event and a process of enormous trauma that we're still living out today, now in our 8th decade. On the left, you see European Zionists placing a constructed flag upon indigenous lands. And on the right, you see something very similar to what's happening in Gaza today. You see displacement of people that are in state of crisis and trauma. And we also understand that the people most vulnerable to displacement are women and girls, particularly of reproductive age. So how does this connect to Gaza? First and foremost, I want to say my father was born in Gaza. My mother was born in Jenin. I am from El Khalil ancestrally. Our city is El Khalil in the West Bank. I've always wanted to go to Gaza because my father was born and raised there. But it's a place I've never been able to go because it's been under a siege. But what I've learned about Gaza has been how much people love life. On the left, you see people that are harvesting their young dates, balah. And on the right, you see Gaza partaking in the harvest. This is in 2019 during its besiegement. Importantly, for Palestinians, Gaza was a refugee sanctuary. Immediately after the Nakba, the people that left or were forced to leave at gunpoint if they were able to survive their depopulated villages, they went on foot to Gaza. In 1948, during the Nakba catastrophe, Gaza became a refugee sanctuary. It's also a place very important to Palestinian historiography because it was at the center of what's considered the Silk Road, right? Gaza was a historic spice route at the center of the old world. Every spice that came from Africa had to stop in Gaza. This meant that Gaza had, in some ways, a very sophisticated cuisine. It was a coastal place, so a lot of fishing and seafood. All of these traditions are what I know of Gaza, and they have all been essentially destroyed. All of these places, unfortunately, have also been destroyed. But one thing to know about Gaza is people are really into physical activity. People really like sports. So even in the context of besiegement, the people of Gaza made life, they competed, and they, even in the circumstances when their soil is so deeply contaminated by repeated aerial bombardment and white phosphorus and other internationally banned toxic chemicals, Gaza cunning came to survive the community by creating horticulture in greenhouses that could survive outside of this toxic soil. This young girl was asked to create a sculpture of her heroes, and she creates a sculpture of Nakba's refugees. By the time the Nakba erupted in 1949, 80% of Gaza was consisted of the Nakba's refugees. So I want to return to this point about reproductive genocide, and I'll wrap up very quickly. 5 points I want to make about this concept of reproductive genocide. The first is that it means physical destruction of spaces of life and shelter. Palestinians have a concept of scholasticide. Scholasticide is names the destruction of spaces of learning, spaces of education. All of the universities in Gaza have at this point been destroyed. Close to 500,000, actually 600,000 students have no place to get their education right now. So this is one example of the physical destruction, but also domicide, the destruction of homes, the fact that over 80% of the buildings of Gaza have been destroyed. People are living in ruins and rubble to try to survive their next day. It also shows how genocide is gendered. And I have a few notes I just want to share here because they are quite important. On the point of the gendering of genocide. So there are an estimated 5,500 pregnant women in Gaza that are giving birth every month. They are experiencing starvation, dispossession, displacement, aerial bombardment, severe stress on their bodies, trauma. They are subjected to cesareans without anesthetics. The doctors have been forced to perform ordinarily unnecessary hysterectomies on young women in an attempt to save their lives, leaving a large number unable to have children. Premature births have increased by 30% since October 7th, and the stress and trauma has disproportionately impacted pregnant women. On November 3rd, 2023, the World Health Organization warned that maternal deaths are expected to rise. There's been a rise in stress-induced miscarriages, stillbirths, and premature births, the report indicated. In January 2024, healthcare workers reported that there was a 300% increase in miscarriages in Gaza. This is not new, of course. We've seen this with the Nazi regime's use of forced sterilization. We've also seen this weaponization of rape during the Rwandan genocide. And all of these points are related, right? They're all tools for the sake of breaking the spirit through the woman's body. Okay, so the next point I want to make, I just have 3 more and I'll stop. Let me go back to my slides here, if I may. I wanted to share a part of the Palestinian Feminist Collective statement here. We bear witness to the reproductive genocide taking place in Palestine by the Israeli regime. We bear witness to traumatized mothers who have to deliver their babies without anesthesia, with doctors using flashlights on their phones to conduct the operations due to being cut off from electricity by the occupation forces. As Palestinian women and girls of reproductive age are dealing with aerial strikes on their neighborhoods, schools, and shelters, they are forced to take pills to stop their menstrual flow in the sheer absence of basic feminine care. Okay, so the third point about reproductive genocide is that it includes sexualized torture. I'm sure you've all by now heard about the events in Sde, for example. We have learned recently that Israel's use of torture has only increased as of August 2024. And this is especially true for Palestinians that are incarcerated in Israeli prisons, which has grown exponentially since October. There are almost 10,000 Palestinians that are in Israeli detention centers, torture chambers, centers, makeshift interrogation centers, and Israeli prisons, and including children. Israel is unique in that it does criminalize and detain children indefinitely. And then there's also ad hoc torture and interrogation camps that have emerged since October 7, substantiated reports of widespread abuse, torture, sexual assault and rape, starvation for extended periods, etc. I'm not going to go too far into this just for the interest of time. The fourth point I wanted to make about reproductive genocide is the way that it is so deeply connected to dehumanization. And I don't think we need slides for that. I'll just go ahead and read my notes. Dehumanization since October happened in many, many ways. Some of them would be allegations that Palestinians rape, but Israelis don't, right? We see this over and over and over again, despite the evidence and despite the false misinformation campaigns that have all been debunked by the most mainstream of newspapers. There is still this sort of conditional, or I shouldn't say conditional, but comparative humanity, where Palestinians are always having to prove their innocence. And this, according to Craig Mokiber, this propaganda is necessary to dehumanize Palestinians, to create a sense of revulsion in the Western public so that Israel can continue to commit genocide with the West's support. Moreover, media representations have only enabled this. They've either ignored what's happening in Palestine, which allows people to turn a blind eye, where most of us can't sleep at night, right? Especially when we're seeing this torture and mass murder of women and children, but also the weaponization of falsified rape allegations to justify genocide that is itself contingent on a dehumanization, particularly of Arab men and Arab masculinity. There was also the celebration of sexual violence against Palestinian prisoners in this DT-Man by Israeli forces, with protests actually happening to promote and support the perpetrators of this heinous crime. Okay, and then finally, the point I want to make is that in order for reproductive genocide to happen, it needs the mass murder and torture of elders, children, and babies. So what this means is that reproductive genocide is not unrelated to genocide more broadly. We've been in this genocide for almost a year. Over 40,000 people are recorded to be killed. You know, the Gaza ministry does not count bodies that are not identified, but estimates are closer to 200,000. There's also a complete breakdown in medical facilities so that they're not able to keep track of the dead because of the total breakdown in Gaza's medical institutions and facilities. Infanticide, the mass murder of babies. Femicide, the mass murder of women. Sophicide, which is a concept that refers to the mass murder of intergenerational wisdom. But it's also the deadliest massacre for journalists, the deadliest massacre of medical professionals and humanitarians, the deadliest massacre of children and babies. So obviously reproductive genocide is connected to the destruction of life. Okay, so to conclude, what does reproductive justice look like, right? And we have all of these examples of reproductive genocide. This is the point I wanted to make about the selective humanity. So I don't know if you all noticed this, but Justin Bieber posted this right here, praying for Israel, not realizing that it was actually an image of Gaza, and then he took it down. Jamie Lee Curtis did the same thing. She had an image of these 3 children, one kid carrying one baby and 3 siblings looking up at the sky at bombs, and wrote "Pray for Israel," not realizing that those were Palestinian kids, and then removed the post as though Palestinians don't deserve empathy. And then Rami Kanazi, the Palestinian-Iranian comedian and journalist, noted that in reports in the United States, it's always Israelis are killed versus Palestinians left dead, right? In our murders, there are no perpetrators. That's the suggestion there. I mentioned this. Okay, and this leads me to here, my final slide. So what does reproductive justice mean? It has to support all women while making space for the urgent matters of feminist concern, like genocide. Reproductive justice has to be understood and addressed holistically and with attention to the broader context and history, in this case of the Nakba and its ongoingness. It also must be attentive to cross-generational trauma, ongoing structural harms, and the afterlives of war. In other words, reproductive justice has to be about justice, right? Okay, that's my final point. Thank you all so much.
Very much, Lila. Oh, thank you. The resistance and resilience of Palestinian people and women and children comes through in the midst of the pain of everything that you have presented to us. And I thank you for that. And I know I do it on behalf of everybody else who is here and listening. Now we are going to give the microphone to two women who will present examples of experiences of amazing solidarity with the Palestinian people and as feminists. And one of them is Pilar. I always say it wrong because I'm dyslexic. She is one of the coordinators of the Global South Feminist Initiative in solidarity with Palestine that many of you know about, and if not, you will hear her about it. And then after her, Jodie Evans from Code Pink, who is also doing amazing solidarity work, tackling the need to get the United States to stop the genocide and the war, with everybody knowing how important that is and how Israel could not continue if the US is stopped. And they have put up a good fight with a lot of other people. So with that, I will turn the microphone over to Pilar, and welcome. We know that you are also, as Lila and everybody else, in a lot of pressure about the work that you're doing these days. So thank you for being here. Adelante, Pilar.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria, and thank you everyone for being here. I want to express my gratefulness because I think these generational gatherings are an important part of the wave of activism. We are a feminist genealogy, you know, so for me these spaces are very, very important and sadly not usual. So I'm very grateful to be here. English is not my main language, so perhaps if you have some parts you don't understand, feel free to let me know. I wanted to tell you briefly how our spaces were born. I'm part of Global Feminist Action and Global South Feminist Assembly for Palestine, which are two spaces deeply entangled. Global Feminist Action actually was born 3 years ago with the international need, the need to gather wide-based networks of feminist international solidarity with the people struggling around the world, especially in this case in the national strike in Colombia. We gather again for the national strike of Ecuador during the dictatorship in Peru. And when the 7th of October strike, we found that this profoundly Latin and global South solidarity was deeply entangled with the struggle of the people in Palestine. So the assembly immediately organized and we saw that we were hundreds of activists around the world, especially from Global South and especially from Latin America. So why from Latin America? Why the Global South? For us, it is important to talk about this experience. It is important to make our voice loud because everything that is not happening in the global north is not taken a voice. You know, it's like we make a lot of demonstrations, we strengthen the wave of activism, but there is this strong interest that these demonstrations, the acts of solidarity in the global south to be not known for Palestinian people, for the people struggling in other places. So for that, I'm grateful to be here and to be able to share with you our experiences, because we share a story of colonization, we share a story of extractivism and occupation. We can reach the colonial expansionist politic of Israel into our continent for many decades ago. We can see the Zionist lobby now operating in our media. We can see the Zionist lobby operating in water enterprises, for example, in Argentina, the same enterprises that are responsible to cut the water of people in Gaza. So, but we can reach this far beyond. We can reach the industry military complex of Israel taking part in dictatorships in Argentina, in Chile, in Brazil. All of this is documented, and we can see now, we can make this history, this occupation, expansionist history of Israel in our continent until now, with the use of repression, with the use of non-lethal arms in demonstrations, weapons that are sold to our governments, that are sold to Latin American states with the slogan that they are proof in territory, which means that they are proof in Palestinian blood and they are proved in Palestinian comrades and women and children and elders. So for us as feminists, for us especially as people in struggle, people in oppression, it was a responsibility. It was a duty for us to uprise, to organize, and especially as feminists, we felt this need to imprint a feminist perspective, an anti-colonial and anti-capitalist perspective to the denounce of genocide in our continents. It's not an easy struggle. We have many struggles. We have also deep pains. We have also deep oppressions that are in our territories. It's not always easy to talk to women in the territories. It's not always easy to talk about this genocide that for many people is happening so far away. But when you cross these borders, when you get to say, when you get to express that the same bullets that are making us blind in repressions, in our movements right now, where we are facing ultra-right uprisings all over the continent, when we get to express that these pains and these tools of oppression, of economic, military, extractivist oppression are proven and are coming from this territory, we are being able to skip this this made-up bridge, this colonial bridge they are trying to make between our peoples. So what we felt this this need to imprint this feminist anti-colonial perspective in Latin America, and internationalists. So we were able to make huge gatherings, online gatherings, which is for us it's weird because we are very used to be on the ground, and we are very used to hug each other, to express another way of making politics. But at the same time, this allowed us to gather us, to hear each other, and also to make important actions. By 25 November, we decided that what can we do as feminists? What can we offer to the Palestinian people who are suffering and they are fighting genocide? So we took this date. We said this is an important feminist day, the 25th of November, which is the day against violence against women. And we said this day is a day for an action, a feminist action against genocide. So we were able to gather how do you say simultaneous action along dozens of countries, mostly in Latin America, but also in South Africa, also in Kenya, and some countries of Europe, of course, motioned by comrades migrants and part of the Global South, because we understand that the Global South is not a geographic statement, it is a political statement. So we are all over the world. That's important for us to reach. And we made this huge action in dozens of countries, in hundreds of cities and little towns. And this 25 of November, it was very important for us because we were able to see huge demonstrations in important cities as Buenos Aires, Sao Paulo, Ciudad de Mexico. But we also saw the Palestinian flag in the ground little streets of small towns in Colombia, in Caribbean towns. And for us, this is how we strengthen the wave of activism and life. It is not, of course, we feel very touched. We are very touched. We are very moved of these big demonstrations, but we also as women and we also as feminists know that the way we are building from the ground our feminism, our anti-colonial feminism, it has so much to do with the little gatherings, with the small and silent gatherings that are taking part. So for us, the 25th of November was very important because it was also the first international collective demonstration of feminisms. We know we got to say also not in our name, because we know how Zionist lobby, even if it's a deeply ultra-right bigot politic, they also know very well how to infiltrate in our movements. And they also know very well how to take our struggles, how to take our pains and try to wash their genocide and their political genocide and occupation and apartheid politic with our struggles. So for us, it was very important to say in our territories, not in our name, because we saw how they talk about the most feminist army in the world. We saw how Lila was saying before, the dehumanization of Arab men, the instrumentalization of lies they are making up. So okay, this is a part. This is for us the most important thing, because it was like a spark. Then it worked as a spark to many other initiatives, and we got together. We got to expand this network with the Global South Feminist Assembly. We got to gather with comrades from South Africa. We got to entangle with many Palestinian comrades too. We got to launch a feminist manifesto for Palestine, and it's how can I say? For us, it's very important in this moment of the state of the war regime around the world. It is very important. It is in this moment where the ultra-right movements are uprising all over the world. What is happening in Palestine? Because as we said at that moment, Gaza and Palestine is an image of the future they want for us all. So we have the responsibility to respond, and it's a militant duty we have to feel every feminist demonstration, to feel every feminist assembly, every space we get to build, to talk about all these things with Palestine. Because for us, today, Palestine, it is the heart of the world. It is the heart of the oppression in the world, but it is also the heart and a clue of how we can build deep internationalist feminist solidarity. So just to end, I want to say that from Abya Yala is the name we use for our continent. It's an indigenous name that how was called our continent before colonization. So we say from Abya Yala to Palestine, feminist, trans feminist resistance and truth, justice, and memory for the brave people in Palestine, and truth, justice, and memory for all peoples struggling against apartheid, genocide, oppression, and extractivism in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pilar. I have to say that global network that she's talking about in the internet is an amazing space for any of you who want to join it. We will put the address. Every morning when you tune into that, you get all of that combination of what the Pilar and also Lila have been addressing. You get all of the expression of the terrible genocide together with the resilience, the resistance, and the connectivity and solidarity that the feminists around the world are expressing. Thank you so much for doing that for us today also. And with that, I would like to welcome Jodie Evans from Code Pink, also doing an amazing work of solidarity and the connection that there is between tackling the policy of the United States to be able to stop it and to stop the genocide. Welcome, Jodie, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you for all you do. And Lila and Pilar, thank you for your words. You know, Jen, and creating this space, because at Code Pink we say, you know, the work is to educate, inspire, and activate. And so coming together and being from our hearts and listening to each other, being educated by each other, that's the core of our work at Code Pink. And I think it's the core of this work because, you know, I heard the word justice. And I think one of the things that we need to recognize in this moment is that we live in a world of injustice, and it has been going for a very long time, since, you know, before World War II. And we've not, as a peace organization, stopped the love of weapons and war. And the Vietnam War, that did it for a while, but we've all let it grow back again. And there is, we can't be witnessing this genocide and think that there is justice in the world right now. And I know many US Palestinian attorneys who have tried everything and cannot believe like how nothing is expressing itself as justice in these days. And certainly Naledi from South Africa, you know, continues, but we don't let that stop us. We let it teach us. So I don't say things to depress, but to point out what we live in, because too many people are living inside of lies, and they have been created. And we call that the whore economy culture. And, you know, the work is always to step out, to be together, to be in these communities, to be holding ourselves in connectivity to what is true and just, and that leads to the liberation. But let's talk about where we are. So, you know, at the beginning of Code Pink 22 years ago, we were just leaving Iraq, where we were witnessing Iraq before the invasion and saying, you know, you shouldn't invade. The sanctions have done such a horrible thing to Iraq. But we stopped on the border of Israel and Jordan and joined Christian, Palestinian, and Muslim and Jewish women, the Women for Peace, with a march across the border for peace. And we were pepper sprayed. And in 2009, after Operation Cast Lead, on Gaza, Code Pink took over a year, over 1,000 people to Gaza. And I would say that reproductive genocide was already in the makings then, that what we witnessed and what was being foisted on the people of Gaza was already untenable. It was already so horrific. And, you know, we're watching horrors, and so we are the horrors layer. But I want to take us back to what was already a reproductive genocide, because to witness, to be present with, is, you know, to reject has to be the process, because the decades and decades of building Zionism is a strong and potent power, and it's ours to build, not in war with it, but in contradiction to it, that will undermine it, and that's been taking place. So after we took all these people to Gaza, well, actually, for International Women's Day, we asked the head of the UNRWA office, you know, what we should be raising money for to help the women. And they said, no, if you could come back on International Women's Day with what you want to give women. And so, you know, I think about that as the local peace economy. What do you want to give and share from your hearts? So we asked their community and took truckloads of beautiful pink baskets filled with goodies, and many of them from the women from Egypt, I just want to say, and farmers and women that also were frustrated by their incapacity to stop this violence to the women in Gaza, the sanctions of Israel and the imprisonment of Israel and the violence of Israel that, you know, the world was not talking about. So we did that, and it was a beautiful time, and the sharing was beautiful, and the generosities and the being in people's homes, and we shared them in small groups across Gaza City. So, you know, that experience in Gaza, and at about the same time, the BDS movement started. And so while we were there, we launched a campaign, a BDS campaign against Ahava, which was a beauty product made from the clay of the Red Sea. So we started this project. And so I want to say that people, when I first started the project, thought they could be violent to me. If I was at a beauty supply company asking them to take it off the shelves, and there was somebody there who was a Zionist, they thought they had permission to hurt me. That's where we started. So the BDS movement, I'm pulling together this history because we're inside a piece of it, but it's not just this moment. Because it was the BDS movement across the world that has built this movement that we stand on the shoulders of right now, that we have been in the streets with across the world, has been built from the BDS movement. So just trying to say that movements and actions matter, because that in our confrontations of these things that needed to be boycotted because they are part of Zionism, and serving Zionism, a violence against the people of Palestine, we were able to do an awful lot of teaching. And it was hard because it went against all the money. And I call it culture because it's like we are created by our cultures, and those lies that perpetrate our lives create us. And so the amount of money that went in the building of Zionism is a lot. We live in a time of growing global reproductive fascism and genocide. And in the liberation of Palestine is the liberation of reproduction. Because with this work, with the beauty of the Palestinian people, who, like indigenous people around the world, call for the humanization, call for their own humanization and their own liberation. It is for the those in the violent empire, the hegemony of the United States, and those that live in other countries to stand with them from the place inside of each of us that is Palestinian, that still is holds indigeneity, even as we've been poisoned by modernity and capitalism and imperialism. So Palestine is ground zero, where we can witness daily the expression of the violent world we live in, but we live in it, all of us. And it is not Bibi Netanyahu, it is not just Zionism. It is infected, you know, as we heard earlier from Pilar, it has infected our governments across the world. But I want to say Palestine has been ground zero for 75 years. It's not just this moment. So I've been a peace activist for 55 years. And what we are witnessing is a systematic putting to sleep of the people, not only in the violent empire, but how we call it the soft power of this global hegemony has affected the governments across the world. And we know it has couped government. If it can't coup the government, if the government won't do what it wants, it will coup them. And I think there's currently 5 coups the United States is pushing forward in place. And we see that a coup in Ukraine has led to what is happening to the people in Ukraine that was led by the US government. So this violent hegemony that unfortunately I live inside of is what Code Pink does daily, is to shine a light on it, to educate about it, to expose it. And certainly and that for the last 11 months has been to expose what is happening in Palestine. But you should know that it steals 65 to 70% of hard-earned tax dollars of the people to build weapons and war globally. And that, you know, that war is against the reproductive freedom of everyone globally. And we're seeing it in so many places as they're about to go to war on Haiti and what's happening in Somalia and Sudan. And so I just, this is a monster. So the culture that we live in is a war economy culture that too many have agreed to support with our daily habits. And what is profound is that Palestine is a peace economy. Its very culture is a peace economy. When you are there, you are in the love and the caring, the sharing, the celebration of life, which is profound and affecting, given how little is there and how daily they're attacked. It is life enriching to be in Gaza, to be in Palestine. I've been in the West Bank many times. I've been arrested in the West Bank. So we see this hegemonic power through finance and nuclear weapons. And, you know, we call on, as we do every day, it to stop. But we also have to be present to that even as, you know, the world saw what happened with Ukraine, and BRICS decided to like embolden itself and come back together and realize that if you could sanction Russia, everyone is gone. You know, like that moment of sanctioning Russia was the exposing of the hegemonic power in its worst for those who run other countries, that even they had to pay attention. Well, so there's the finance, and then there's nuclear weapons. And I want us all to recognize that we live in a time where the United States military and the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States and the Secretary of State of the United States have glib conversations about winning nuclear wars. And I want us to understand that that is also core to the capacity to this psychopathic violence that we witness every day, that we cannot believe, our psyches cannot hold, that this is happening, that this is actually happening. And when I talk to my friends in Gaza, when I talk to the women in Gaza during the day, to hear, I feel it, and I know we all feel it, but to hear them not understand why this cannot stop, because it is so insane. It is so insane. And who has the courage to fight back? Those with sticks and stones, those who have lost everything but their dignity and their commitment to life and liberation. And we see it with Yemen and we see it with Lebanon. It's not those that have power and are afraid to lose it, or those that have lost everything and know that they must act in the face of this psychopathy. So I'm pulling us further because I want to talk about what it's like to be in the halls of Congress. You know, I talked about what it's, you know, like to watch the breaking of international laws every day. But also, Code Pink has been in the halls of Congress since we started. Thank you, Jen Vaughan. But since the last 11 months, just on Palestine. And every week we have another thing. People come from across the country, but also across the world to stand with us and be with us. And on International Women's Day, we delivered the message of the Palestinian women about this genocidal reproductive genocide. But we delivered it to the women who are senators and members of Congress that are owned by Zionism, and their ears were closed. AIPAC and Kufi, Christians United for Israel, own members of Congress. They can, if you haven't watched Code Pink videos, to watch a member of Congress be totally deaf to, you know, because with us in the halls of Congress are Palestinian mothers, they're Palestinian doctors, they're Palestinian people who have lost, you know, 100 members of their family in Gaza. It's not, we're not sharing facts, we are sharing stories that they can still have closed hearts and minds to. So, you know, Code Pink has been protesting AIPAC for the 22 years we've existed. Every conference we are there, we've been arrested. Our staff and volunteers have been violated, have been brutalized. You know, one in protesting Bibi was put in the hospital. So it's not like it just started. This has been happening for a long time. But what also has been happening is the systematic building of the violent structure of Zionism inside all systems of power, and the brainwashing of people with lies. I mean, what we can see in Netanyahu is psychopathy that is then infecting others. They live inside these lies, the lies of the rapes. I mean, you know, if I think about how we keep getting confronted as we walk the halls of Congress, what about October 7th? And we're like, what about the last 75 years? What about the rapes of women? What about the rapes of Palestinian women and men that have been happening for 75 years? So, you know, having the capacity to stand up against the talking points that are insidious inside of the people, they make me cry, because I feel sorry for people who have literally given their brains to be owned by violence. And an example is at the Democratic National Convention a few weeks ago, we protested outside as the delegates went in and the delegates came out. And I want to say this was the most militarized and shut down convention I've ever been at. And I have been at every one since 1976. But, and I've disrupted everyone. I did manage to get in and have my Free Palestine banner while Obama was speaking, but it was the hardest ever. And the cameras were told not to cover any disruptions. So it was the first time my disruption was not covered by national news, because they were instructed not to, that everyone is in instruction. So if you don't understand that we are already living inside fascism, certainly inside the United States, and as Pilar said, you know, around the world, these governments, if they aren't agreeing to this fascism and this militarism, they're going to be couped. You know, the president of Colombia just announced that he will be couped or dead in 3 months, understanding the patterns that we're living inside of. But as this young woman who was outside with us protesting was reading the names of the women and children in Palestine who had been murdered by Israel, we watched the delegates leave the convention hall with their ears plugged or just pretending they couldn't hear, which is what it looks like when we're talking to members of Congress. Ears plugged, pretending they can't hear, or layering with lies about who Hamas is or who the Palestinians are, or that they deserve it, including unborn children. I mean, it's that ridiculous. So in this time of no justice and those in power being bought by Zionism and the structures of power underneath that, the media, the courts being owned by Zionism, a violence that is against the laws of man and nature. They are against certainly the laws of the Constitution of the United States of America. They are against international, it is against international law, the oppression and occupation of another people. And in the UN, it's the oppressor has the right to defend itself, not the oppressed has the right to defend itself, not the oppressor. And we've watched that language be stolen and reformed and just infecting the world. So what does justice, what do our calls for justice mean when there are no laws? What can we demand from justice when those stepping into the position to carry out justice are owned by violence, fascism, and genocide? So I want to bring us back to the power of that boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, and where we need to come to places where the reproductive genocide can be brought to those places. Because it, and I was part of the BDS movement for South Africa. We are at the space where we need to sanction Russia as countries, where those countries that still can sanction and not deliver, where real acts that undermine power and undermine the money. You know, where have we made the biggest effect in the United States is where we had the people have power. So this moment is to remember that it is always the people. It is never power that creates change. It has always been throughout history, the people, and that is us. And so it's how do we organize the people to undermine the power, to pull the rug out, to expose, to shine light on. And that is the boycott, divestment, sanction movement, because it is global, or that is calling on our specific governments to do the boycott, divestment, sanctions. Right now in the United States, we have 2 more months to make a difference that we've already made. The President of the United States of America had to take himself out of the race because he had lost. It was clear he had lost because the movement, the love for the people of Palestine had left him. And that movement that stood against the violence made it so that he could not be president again. Those possibilities happen daily. At Code Pink, we get resolutions in cities across the country where they have said, no, we will not be a resolution. But when we bring the people in, when they hear the stories, and when their lies are debunked, they fall. In my city, they said never. We won 6-1 at 2:00 in the morning. It's happening. It's still happening. Where can you create a very specific campaign that you will not let go of until you win? Because if we say just saying things right now, do not deliver them. We need to be as clear and organized and targeted as the fascist Zionists have been, and build power locally. Where have they built power? They have built it locally. We talk about how much money they have funded of the senators and the president and the Congress people, but they have funded city councils and state governments to change all the laws, to suggest that by calling for the liberation of Palestine, we are being anti-Semitic and therefore we belong in jail. These laws were changed over 20 years. So for us, it's to remember that, you know, what has been built that we are up against and how to find the ways to undermine it. And, you know, we're in Congress every day, but I can tell you that they are owned, literally owned and afraid of Zionism. So we have to make them afraid of us. And where that happens is with elections, and we were effective. So for the next 2 months, we are making it very clear that no lover of the people of Palestine is voting for a Democrat, and I would say, or a Republican for that matter. So we are not voting for the two-party system. And we're Code Pink, we're a 501c3, but what we are doing is pointing out that these two parties are voting for a genocide, are voting for Zionism, which is against the laws of the United States. So, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but what hasn't happened in the United States is that because we're not moving much, like members of Congress, to stop the weapon sales. There's a 20 billion weapon sales that's now going through, and Bernie Sanders told us he's going to put up a resolution next week to try to stop it. But I know we will not stop it because it is a Senate full of Zionists. And Bibi's convinced them that to save Israel, he needs all of this. He tells them he needs it to fight Iran and Lebanon and Syria, but he just uses it to kill Palestinians. And these dumb members can't seem to figure that out, or to understand that they're violating their own laws every day, or to understand that history will come back, or to understand that we are powerful enough to one day put them in jail. But we have to build this movement of very specific, very local things that we can do that educate, inspire, and activate, trying to light on and undermine, pull the literal rug out from underneath Zionism. And it is going to take all of us, but we should be inspired by the difference it has made. And by, you know, the White House is still going freaking crazy because they thought putting lipstick on a pig, which was Kamala, was going to change our hearts and minds. But sitting there for 24 hours outside the convention and saying, where is a voice, a Palestinian voice on this stage that has had every other voice, including Republicans, warmongers, where is the voice of the Palestinian? And to be denied that was educational. As all nonviolent direct action is, it exposes the violence, and it did a very good job of that. And not only did it expose the violence of Kamala, but she exposed her own violence. So standing with the values of feminism, and as Jen said, the values of mothering, is going to expose this violence for what it is, which is global, financialized violence that none of us can be in agreement with, because we are watching the reproductive genocide that is created with that violence. And so both need to be addressed.
Thank you very much, Jodie Evans. Very articulate the three presentations in the way that it all comes together in the relationship between reproductive genocide, the BDS, and the history of the control that the arms and war and capitalism, extractivism, supremacist, and patriarchy is trying to wrap around the control of the world, and the resistance and the resilience that keeps growing and keeps developing. I would like now to ask all three of you who have just presented to take 12 minutes, 15 minutes to come together, the three of you, and share with the 65 people that are listening now and those who will listen afterwards, what solidarity in what you have explained to all of us takes so many forms and so many shapes and has all of the angles that describe a reproductive genocide that is about doing away with the web of life. However, as Jodie said, as Lila expressed, and also Pilar, there are focus that we have to do in every moment to be able to continue and to be effective in that resistance to make the changes that we need. I would like all three of you to come and begin with Lila to address, to tell us what, if you could zero in on solidarity, what would you suggest to all of us? And I would like to start with Lila and then ask Pilar and then also ask Jodie. Lila?
It's a great question. And thank you, Jodie, for your presentation as well. You know, solidarity has taken a lot of different forms. There is the kind of support that shows up. But then there's also the way that we do solidarity that I think is extremely important. And I'm thinking about, for example, a Palestinian indigenous practice of bread making, okay, using the tabon ovens. Tabon ovens are an ancestral oven that our foremothers made by hand using materials from the countryside. These ovens were outdoors. They were oftentimes used during the harvest when people were in their fields and groves. They would go to this outdoor oven to help prepare food and to celebrate the harvest, to pray, to give blessings, to gossip, to joke. It's really, the tabon oven is had a process to it. So what is the process of the tabon oven and how does this relate to feminist solidarity? The way that it worked was women who would often do the work of making the ovens and preparing this bread. The tabon oven was kind of a space of feminist gathering and life regeneration. So all the things that I mentioned happened: talking, gossiping, joking, praying. But there was a way that when, let's say, you brought your dough to the oven, to the communal oven to bake it, right? And then you take your bread and you go. There were certain kinds of aspects of that that were important. For example, you make sure that the space is always clean, that somebody else can use it, right? There was also a process that involved all of the senses. So when the scent of fresh bread was in the air, people knew that the oven would be ready for somebody else to use. There was a sort of unspoken synergy that in many ways is sustaining Gaza. So in Gaza, for example, in the absence of water and electricity and fuel and food, people have returned to their foremothers' ovens because they don't require electricity. They're outdoors. You can also make them. So people are also making them as a way to prepare food to ward off starvation during this genocide. All of these things are to say that solidarity, feminist solidarity, is a process. It's about assessing need. It's about responding to what's most urgent and bringing it to the center and not waiting for somebody to tell you what's important. And it's also about understanding the connections. As Pilar said, sometimes people have a hard time understanding the connection, but then you will literally remind them, for example, that the DRC, right, what's happening in the Congo is a product of Zionist occupation. That's the language that's being used locally. So when you understand these connections, it's a certain kind of synergy that happens across time and space. And I know I'm speaking very conceptually, but this is the first thought that came to mind, because bread is all about life making, and it's about life regenerating, and it's about sustaining women, and it's about sustaining women even in the face of genocide. So what does that look like in terms of solidarity? Again, looking at us as always connected through our desire for better worlds for ourselves and for the people that come after us. And that's not just about our corporeal body, it's our collective body. In many cases, it's our indigenous nation or national body. And it's also our world. Like, we are right now confronted with the task of preserving whatever shred of democracy exists on this planet, particularly in the Western countries. And if there is any kind of international law, it is only made meaningful by the work of feminists coming out of the global South in South Africa and elsewhere. So I guess these are the thoughts that come to mind in thinking about solidarity. I'm sorry, they're not so coherent. They're not very coherent.
Thank you very much. It's very important to always remember that it has to do basically with the fact that we have to accept that women know how to keep the flame moving of the web of life. That is what being annihilated today in the world. And that is very coherent, Lila. Thank you so much for reminding us that that's the main thing. And everything else stems from that. Thank you. Pilar.
Yeah, I have to say, first of all, that I imagine this is a shared feeling. Everything we are doing feels not enough. Everything we are doing feels like we feel so powerless, and we are fighting against this feeling we all have. No, I want to say this because we can share a lot of things. We are doing demonstrations, gatherings. We are doing what we can, and it's so big and it's so overwhelming. This regime of war in Palestine, that it's this feeling. I believe it's shared. I didn't want to not say that. I want to say also that for me and for us, it's important to put in discussion the solidarity word, to put in debate, because for us, we must stop. Of course, we have to express solidarity, but for us, Palestinian struggle against genocide and the struggle against genocide in Palestine, it is our fight. It is not a matter of solidarity. It is not a matter we do because we care for them, because we are so sorry and it's so terrible. The war in Palestine, the war of all global North, with the hand of Israel, but it's the war of all the North global against Palestine. It's a war against all of us. So that for me is, and for us, it's very important to state and to open dialogue and connections. What we want to do, what we're trying to do, what we find it's important, it's to deepen in territorial nodes. It's to strengthen territorial people-based solidarity movements in order to have how can I say, to extend solidarity as a way we saying, but also and to make a sharpen and specify responses of the Zionist lobby all over the world. For example, our movement, it was born international with this gathering, but we are now actually working a lot in our national nodes, because the realities of the Zionist lobby in every country, even if they are deeply entangled, are different. It's not the same way Chile, how it works in Chile as how it works in Argentina, how it works in Brazil. So for us, it is important to strengthen these territorial nodes. It is also important to reclaim Palestinian life. For us I think that part of reproductive genocide and part of this ongoing genocide is that for us and the whole world to think about Palestine and to think about rubber and death and blood and destruction. And for us, Palestine is way more than that. And it is also a task we have to reclaim the life, to reclaim the knowledge, to also entangle with that, to strengthen Palestinian voices. It's something I will say something a little polemic, but I have this perception that in order to be able to speak about genocide, we need a Jew voice to say this is genocide. And for me, it is very important that we call for Palestinian voices, and also we call for Arab voices to talk about this. It's a way of reclaiming Palestinian life. We don't want that Gaza and Palestine, when my nephews think about it, or young activists think about Palestine, think about rubber. It is not that. It was never that, and we must not allow that Palestine become this in the activist imaginary and the whole imaginary of people. So that for me, it's important. We need to keep finding ways to interconnect our struggles. We need to keep how can I say, to keep putting Palestine in our struggle. So we make this this work because in Argentina we are deeply mobilized, and Palestinian movements, comrades that are part of Palestinian movements, they are also anti-extractivist activists. So for us, these ways of struggling, of entangling Palestinian struggle against genocide with the extractivism in our territories, with the feminist issues, which the comrades from Palestine Feminist Collective were, I don't know, your work is very important for us to make these connections. It is very important because for us it's a long-term fight. It's a marathon, as a way of saying. It's not 7 October as we've been saying, and it will not end when the ceasefires end. So we need to struggle to deepen the fabric of activism. We need to deepen the fabric of activism and internationalism all over the world. And regarding on that too, I think that we need to incorporate in our language, in our statements, that what we are fighting is a war regime as a whole. So what's happening in Palestine is deeply entangled on what is happening in other countries, or what is happening with the extraction of resources in our countries, because it is a regime of war. The industry, the military complex is not some bad thing that's happening here. It's all entangled. So we must, and it's woven on the war regime. So because we are living in a war regime. And regarding to that too, I think we need to prepare for harder times. We need to prepare physically, we need to prepare collectively, we need to stop talking about us and me and what I feel and how this hurts me a lot. And we need to talk about this collectively, because harder times are coming in the whole world. We know this because we saw what is October 8th, not 7. So that is an important task, living in these moments of ultra-right uprising, but also in the individualist moment, when they are inviting us to compel and to feel sorry from our screens, and not collectively. So that's some things I have in my mind now.
Thank you very much. Very important. The talking points that we have been preparing about reproductive genocide as of today is going to include a talking point about redefining and expanding and deepening solidarity. Thank you so much. Jodie?
Thank you, Pilar. I think you touched on some important points I want to expand on. But, you know, just to say, solidarity is the core of the work of Code Pink. Really, what we feel that we live inside of that violent hegemony, and our job is to scratch at that power that is affecting the women of the world and the planet. So, and that is done by listening, by taking direction, by being in a sisterhood with. That is the DNA of our being, because it is only through solidarity that change can occur, that is intelligent, because it has to be seeded with the intelligence of those that are the most affected, and in intelligence, I mean that the real relationship to what is, which I just want to raise up again, which is what we are denied in the world we live in right now. We are so infected with lies that take us away from that intelligence of life, of being connected, of knowing exactly what is happening and how to articulate it, and where from that place the reasons are so clear. Because I have to say, inside an empire, everyone is stupid. And also the problem is they think imperial thinking. And it goes to that like individualism. It's why I created the cultivating a local peace economy, because we're our group is committed to internationalism, and we are members of international organizations, the Women's March, the International People's Assembly, Progressive International, so that we have the connective tissue to hear from, but also to understand that and as Pilar said, what is coming, I call a tsunami, that this violent, oppressive, destructive war economy has created a tsunami of inequality, global climate change, coming fascism. We're now in fascism, and we have to name it, and AI, which is patriarchy on steroids. All AI, there's nothing intelligence about AI. It is not intelligent at all. It is disconnected from anything intelligent. It is disconnected from life. It is an O and a 1. And it is just the patriarchy on steroids. And it's just information in that is then spewed out. And so it's a way to make patriarchy infect you even worse. Just sorry to diverge. So it is why our work is also to build the local peace economy, because with the coming tsunami, it is, as Pilar said, it is our also solidarity with those the closest to us, in building our muscles to be in relationship, to be in community, to be in support, to be there for each other for what is coming. Because we have too much, certainly in the United States, but it's a global disease of individualism. And why after 11 months am I still vibrant and have the capacity, even having my heart broken every day and crying every day, is because I am in the streets every day. I'm in the halls of Congress every day. I am with every day the community, both locally, nationally, and internationally, in the co-creation, the strategizing, the nourishment of what needs to be done. And in the what needs to be done, it is love. And to be in the stand for humanity, in the stand for love, and in that way, and I want to say that the only real change that we've been able to affect has been from that, has been, I love Palestine, so I am not going to vote for this party, was that huge change. But I'll also say that as we're in the halls of Congress and we're doing these teach-ins every day in a member of Congress or senator's office, sometimes 70 a day, who have we moved with our love has been the interns. And so it's remembering that you need to be out there. It's the engagement necessary. It's the solidarity with that nourishes, and it is then the engagement from, and being visible. And the other thing we do in solidarity is we create a container for activism to happen. To create, because they're creating containers, they're creating forms all the time to focus the passion, to focus the grief, to focus the anger, to focus it. So at Code Pink, we feel like that's our task, to be able to create container of focus to create change. And, you know, having the interns listen to our stories every day and then come out organized together and go against their bosses, because they're not owned by AIPAC. They don't have a job that their life depends on, and they are watching the horrors, and they can actually hear us still. So it's that being relational is what I think solidarity is being relational to those who are in the experience of what we are talking about and raising up their voices. So in the halls of Congress are always with us Palestinian mothers, Palestinian doctors, Palestinian teachers, or rabbis, or priests, or, you know, it's those whose hearts have been affected that speak. We create the container, the visual, and the capacity to share it. But it's like the voices that have power are those that can tell the story of the essence of what is happening. Because we at Could Pink can tell the story of the structure of violence that we are all living in, the war economy, and how potent it is. But it is the essence of truth and love that will wear it away. And to me, that is the solidarity. I also want to say, you know, people say, oh, why do you march? Marches are an expression of solidarity. When we come together and march and around the world, we're nourished by each other's marches. When we see tens of thousands or 500,000 in the streets around the country, those are the nourishment of the heart of solidarity. Why do we march? To be visible, to be heard, and to nourish each other. So also for me, solidarity is how we nourish each other. Solidarity is the principle of being in relationship, and that what happens there is strategy, what happens there is learning, and what happens there is nourishment. Also, I just want to say at the People's Forum, which we just had our 6th anniversary yesterday, a space, so I want to speak to the space and convenings that is solidarity. So it's a space we created for the incubation of movements. And every Monday night, which was the day we were closed 10 months ago, we opened to create a space for the local leaders to come together to plan, to be in relationship for, you know, what they would do in the next weeks and months. And space is important. Having a space of convening. As Pilar said, you know, it's like when it's fun to be in Zoom, but where you know, the juiciness happens is when we can hug each other, when we can, you know, have those arguments that refine our thinking. They happen with time and in place. And so, you know, it's at the People's Forum every Monday night where the Palestinian movement comes together and plans. And it's a vibrant, beautiful, fabulous place to be and learn and be nourished. So, you know, some come to, you know, present their plans, others come, I know, just to be nourished by the being together, and that, you know, we can stand up after watching horror after horror and yet go forward with the next plan. So, and then the next thing is convening, and that is a form of solidarity for me, and that is that we had a conference of 3,500 of the leaders around the country for the pro-Palestine movement. And, you know, what in the creation of the conference leaders were a delegation of about 20 of those kind of that represented all the different threads of the movement. And, you know, the 3 days together was to hear all our different voices, that we're all different and say different things and have a different rooting, and to be nourished by all the voices, and then the planning together of what would come out of it, that nourishment happened first, and that the nourishment happens from what happens from the stage, but there was plenty of time made space for the nourishment that happens in the halls and happens in the feeding of each other. Oh my goodness, the Palestinian honey that our Could Pink Long Island member was feeding everyone with, that it is in the feeding of each other and the nourishment of each other, and that you know, solidarity is what we do locally to bring to the table for the global movement also. And that with this tsunami that we are living at the beginning of, that Palestine is the beginning of, that we remember to cultivate peace economies locally, that we remember to help those that are being owned and have been infected by the war economy, to pivot to the peace economy values, to build the local community, because it is that local community that strengthens the power that all together we create that mycelium of love and peace that has to rise so that the violence and war and hate die, because we won't stop it going at it like this, but it will die. It doesn't create anything. Hate and violence, they don't create anything, they end. And it is our connectivity that will be the service to that ending.
Thank you so much, Jodie. Thank you to the three of you for reminding us that we are going to work to face more difficult times, but we have what it takes and have been building it. I tell you also, as a elder feminist of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and now, that the movement and the people coming forward everywhere with the strength that it takes today in the face of fascism is really very important and very inspiring. We have what it takes to face the worst. The Palestinian people are showing us, and we are showing it to each other. And thank you for reminding that that connection is really the what keeps us together. I would like you to breathe for 1 minute. I need that. I don't know if you do, but just be quiet, not for a whole minute, because you can't do that in internet, but just breathe 3 times deeply, and then we'll see how to move forward with the rest of our agenda.
I just wanted to ask if the November 25th march that Pilar talked about is going to be done again this year, and can it be made much more international and much stronger? Because what we really need is a international women's movement active in all countries.
Good question. Pilar, any of you want to address that?
Well, I mean, I think that what's beautiful is leadership in the whole movement are Palestinian women across the world. That my experience has been that, you know, definitely Palestinian women have been at the forefront of most of the movements that I'm in relationship with. If not, clearly their voices are at the table. And that I mean, that we must also recognize that power of these voices, that you know, for me, it's why we lift them up when we're going through Congress. They're the voices that are not heard. They're the voices that hold inside of them the humanization that is denied every day in this financialized, militarized power structure that has strangled all of us. You know, it's the calls have been global, and some people take them up, some people can't take them up, some people wrong timing, but you know, we are coming up to the 2 weeks global call of activism that is going to happen across the world. I think it starts on the 30th of September and it goes till the 12th of October, and it is the witnessing of the year. And it's you know, not dictating which day to choose, but that for 2 weeks you see globally the solidarity and the voices and the uplifting. And you know, I just want to say that Palestinian voices are denied every day across the world, in our mainstream media, you know, we are infected with the voices of oppressors. And so, you know, it's for the solidarity is to stand up and be present, to lift up the voices that we, you know, that are on these stages that are Palestinian. And I would, you know, again say that I find most of them are Palestinian women. But to hear, like to hear not the words, but the heart, is what's so important. We are drowning in voices of violence. We are literally drowning in them. And that's all of us globally. The effect on media, we have to think about, you know, how you act in solidarity is you do not listen or mimic or, you know, or have come out of your mouth the information that is coming out of the violence of the media. That is solidarity. You know, that we are, all of us, infected with information that is violent. And, you know, I saw someone earlier post about the Chinese Uyghur genocide. And I just want to say that that is US State Department propaganda, that even the State Department says there's not a genocide. Yes, I'm sure horrible things have happened. But when you use that in China, where a genocide is actually happening in Palestine, you deprive what is happening that is so horrific. So horrific. So also, you know, solidarity is the coming together, that it's the in my fear, in my worry, that is forced on us. The concern about going to the march, the concern about leaving your house, that fear is forced on you to address it, to say, I feel this fear. And even with it, I must move forward. I must see the fearlessness is where I want to root myself. So sorry, I got way off, but
Okay, so thank you. No, that's okay. We have 10 more minutes to the 2 hours, and I know that some of you have to leave, and we still have the commentators. I would like for Pilar to take the proposal of Genevieve, because we agree with the session on the 25th of November last year that brought about 700 grassroots organizations, including the Palestinians, gave voice also to the solidarity, the voices of the solidarity that we don't hear all the time. And so alongside these activities that will take place in October, I would like us, Pilar, to take in, I form part of, and Genevieve and many of us, of that global, to see if we can do it on the 25th of November again, an assembly the way that it was done. Thank you, Jenny, for the proposal. Just as an introduction, 30 seconds. We have been working in talking points about the reproductive genocide to be able to put a series of points that you have heard here today, not all of them, many of them, from everybody. They're not new. I mean, they're not, you know, out of the sky, but out of what has been happening and doing. And so we want to bring 2 of those points that we have been deepening, one in the voice of Paola Melchiori about ecocide, and then Peggy, and I don't know if Pregs from South Africa was able to come in and join us. I don't see her, but Peggy will also talk to us about the political economy of the war and genocide in this moment. Paola?
No, it was so rich. I think I go back on a step, because the point of ecocide is to see the specificity that focuses on the impossibility of survival for those who don't die in Palestine now under the bombs because of hunger and polluted water, but in the future year, which is estimated to be 1/4 of the population. So to have clear in mind how the Zionist project works is to have clear in mind what is happening as a project in the world for the targeted at the South mainly. So And so we can hear with no problem after the 7th of October, the Zionist generals say, Gaza will be a place where no human being can exist. Those who return here, if they ever return, will find scorched earth. No houses, no agriculture, no nothing. So the ecocide, which I hasn't have so clear in mind, is a project of reframing completely the condition of life. So it is the interface where the people and the environment are in continuity, and it's the breaking of this continuity through the destruction of these key elements. So this is where we have to go also contrast step by step. So is to take away the burdens of the future, women and children, we have already talked about that. The institution that give people a sense of social bond and belonging, communities, schools, hospitals. Yesterday, they bombed the Conservatory of Music. How the hell they found that? The most important in terms of ecocide is the relationship that of the environment that sustains their life, psychologically and economically, farms, businesses, the agriculture, which makes people that cannot farm or cultivate any land, and they are completely dependent on foreign aid. So when foreign aid is not there, what happens in terms of hunger? So under all that, there is this white man, I am a European, so I know very well how I am embedded in that, is the omnipotent colonial, new colonialist white man project that doesn't see itself not as part of the universe, but as the master of the universe, the master of nature, the master of women and all other humans that are simply free disposable resources or objects of study, and this completely despised. In Palestine, we see now the combination of the old colonial project, classic, that works as everywhere has worked. So through the classic practices, deportation of women and children, destruction of crops, poisoning of the water, cementification through new villages, and deforestation and reforestation under the mythology of the good gardeners, and planting trees with continuous bulldozing, spraying pesticide, importing foreign species that destroy the local ones together with the local economy, and species that are more vulnerable to fire, require more water, acidify the soil, and destroy the old indigenous agricultural, farming, fishing practices experimented for centuries that were working. So when Lila was talking about the oven, I was remembering the moments of the resistance of Palestinian women in these aspects. So according to the UN satellite study, 35% of agricultural land was already desertified around Gaza for these practices, and now the same is happening in the West Bank. The new tools today, though, are total destruction bombs. We see them in the TV, but it's difficult to imagine the implication of these images. So bombs, debris, toxic chemical pollution, dioxin, rubbles, medical materials, radioactive waste, all together, and combined with bureaucratic vetoes on moving, on farming, on fishing in certain areas, on working and living in all these areas, and justified with intelligence precautions. So now water and soil are unlivable in those areas. Cultivation is impossible. Climate change is going to go skyrocketing, and dependence on foreign aid is increasing. The expert from Queen Mary and Lancaster University, working with the Climate and Community Project, calculated that the bombing of the first 2 months on Gaza are equivalent to 3 Hiroshima bombs, while the emissions that would be required for the reconstruction are estimated to be equal to those of New Zealand for an entire year. So we are facing that. And what I know about resistance of the Palestinian people, I know that some people that now cannot work in Israel are coming back and trying to find how to retake some land and how to try a way of cultivate. So there are this invention of these places that don't depend on the soil. And there are, these aspects are only financed through popular donations because governments have gone out. And so solidarity through popular financial supporting special project is one of the ways that I hear starting to struggle again, point by point, against this terrible landscape that we have to have in mind when we struggle. That's it.
Thank you very much for that point, Paola. And I will, without any other comment, I will turn it over to Greg, Govender, and Peggy, Antrobus. They're going to do it together as it was explained to me. I'm very happy to announce that Pregs is here from South Africa. I just saw her picture. I wasn't sure she had been able to come in. She was not in the program because we didn't know if she was going to be able to come and to talk to us about the case about genocide in the courts, in the international courts that South African government has taken to the court. Welcome, Pregs. It's very important for us to know about your work in putting gender in the case of genocide in the court, and also Peggy to be able to talk about the politics of economy in the genocide. I don't know which of you is going to talk first. I'm very sorry, but I'm really happy about both of you. Peggy, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. And in fact, we're out of time. And when I listened to the 3 presentations, I wondered whether there's really anything I can add, because I think that Pilar and as well as Jodie made many references to which I wanted to make. So I'll just, at this point, just summarize, just highlight. I was making 3 points. So the first point I wanted to make was history, and Pilar has already spoken of that. I thank her for reminding us that this is simply the latest iteration of a struggle that started over 500 years ago with the conquest of the Americas by the Europeans, the genocide of the indigenous people, the colonization of Africa, Asia, and the islands of the Pacific by the Europeans, and the enslavement of Africans, and the movement of thousands of people from South Asia to work as indentured labor on plantations in the Americas and the Caribbean. So that is the first point. The second point, I wanted to talk a little bit about Israel's economy. And again, Jodie has made several references to that. It's the most militarized, one of the most militarized countries in the world. It justifies it by arguing that it has to protect the country from the Palestinians and their supporters in the Arab world. But in fact, Israel is, in a sense, a strategic base in the Middle East for the Western industrialized countries and their corporations. And what Israel is really doing is protecting the interests, the economic interests and assets in that part of the world. I wanted to emphasize that a major sector of Israel's economy is the production of the most sophisticated, technologically advanced arms. And these arms and training in their use are exported across the globe. Many countries depend on Israel for their security. And I think that this is undoubtedly one of the reasons most countries have not cut diplomatic ties with Israel. And then the third point I wanted to make was to do with Israel's relationship, not just with the Western alliance, but also with the rest of the world. And that's my point. This is not surprising. The Israeli economy is so embedded in other countries that it is not difficult to understand why they have not cut diplomatic relations. So in the end, I think it is only the BDS, the boycott, divest, and sanction campaign that can change things. Certainly in the context of my point about political economy, that is what's going to change. So I really wanted to ask Pregs to address you now and to talk a bit about sharing with you the price that is being paid by South Africa for their principled and courageous stand against the genocide. Pregs is a writer, an author, an activist against apartheid. She was an MP and a human rights commissioner in South Africa's democracy. So Pregs, over to you. Thank you very much for coming at such short notice to share with us and in such little time. And Maria, I want to suggest that maybe we could continue talking a bit longer, because I feel that Pregs has much more to share with us about what's going on
If
right
you look at the chat, Lila, which was my main concern, said that she's going to stay because it's very important what is happening. So she's going to stay as long as she can, because she's not leaving because she wants to, but because she has to. So go ahead, Pregs, and take your time. And I hope that all the 65 people that are here agree, and you know, you can leave, but we're going to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you, Peggy. I think I just wanted to say also, firstly, I was trying to cut down what I had to say to 1 minute. But I think the key point from what everyone has said for me is really the issue of how do we ensure that the voices of the Palestinian women, the voices of Palestinian feminists, is heard loudly and clearly. Because I think that's the critical question that is motivating what South Africa needs to do, what South Africa has done, but also what the consequences are. Because I think each time we assert our power against a war economy, a global war economy, you know, the apartheid in South Africa wasn't just a racist state, it was a racist, patriarchal and capitalist state. And I think that experience with that gives us a particular understanding of the importance of international solidarity. and so that solidarity had its roots many, many years ago during our struggle against apartheid. 1948, apartheid was formally voted, the apartheid state was formally voted into power by the white minority. And there's been a parallel between our two countries. And I think the issue of what the consequences of, what was the motivation for South Africa to bring the case to the ICJ was obviously in terms of what happened with the UN system, was that even though the majority of the world's governments voted for an immediate ceasefire, that was vetoed by the US in the United Nations Security Council. So I think the question of how do we use different strategies, that one strategy doesn't demean or undermine another, but they complement each other. In South Africa, during our struggle against apartheid, many of us used to say we need to educate, we need to organize, we need to mobilize, we need to unite, we need to resist, and we need to transform, and we need to have a revolution that will actually fundamentally change people's lives. And so many of us worked in many different parts of movements that were all trying to change the racist, patriarchal, and capitalist state. And I think the issue of what happens in Palestine is really exposing, what we're seeing live on our screens is really what is happening. What it's exposing is what has been happening for 75 years outside of people's screens, away from the visibility. And so the issue of, but it's not also what it is lifting the veil on is not what is just happening in Palestine, but what has happened, the genocides that have happened across the world, most of which have not been seen, have not been visible. And who are the powers that have driven this? Who have the powers, and what it is that we could actually do to shift that, to stop that. And I think that Pilar and Jodie and others have spoken today about how long this is going to be. But I think the question that how would we actually make sure that in shifting this, that the genocide is understood, that all genocides are reproductive genocides, all genocides aim to end life. And I think and I want to say a special thank you to Lila and to the Palestinian Feminist Collective for both your statement on reproductive genocide and the concept note, because both have been passed on to South Africa's legal team, and hopefully they will be able to integrate much of this understanding in what is going to happen going forward. But I think the issue is that alone is not going to stop. And as we've seen, it's not stopped Israel's impunity, because Israel is backed. And as Peggy has said already, Israel's strategic positioning is in terms of the power of the United States, the power of Germany, the power of Britain, and other vested interests. So how to actually build the solidarity against that means to also understand that there's going to be consequences. And I mean, immediately after, and I think the immediate consequences that we've seen has been the United States bill that has been put forward by both political parties, and it's clearly about punishing South Africa. The Israel's lobby that has been lobbying against South Africa very, very furiously in the last while. It's something that has been exposed. But I think that what we're also seeing is in South Africa, the way in which resources, and this is what Israel and its supporters have. They have resources, and they have been using those resources to try to push their narrative and to push continued support for Israel and against the South Africa attempting to continue the case, the ICJ case. And during the elections, for example, we saw that the white-led opposition party received the greatest amount of funding from any other party, including the ruling party, that had been the ruling party, the ANC. So the DA got a huge amount of funding. There's also funding that's been poured into specific media houses, education, academic institutions, into think tanks, the private sector, the religious organizations. And there's a real attempt to win over South African society to a Zionist agenda. But I think more dangerously, and as was part of that, has been to support, including groups that are articulating anti-poor, anti-working class, anti and to also to promote xenophobia, racism, etc. So you're seeing an attempt to fragment South African society in many different ways. And I'm not saying that we as a country don't have huge problems. We do. We're faced with an attempt to transform an incredibly unequal society where you have billionaire corporations in agribusiness and in the extractive industry who earn hundreds of millions a year, the CEOs who oppose minimum wages for workers. So there's huge problems in our country. But what this is doing is actually, a lot of this funding is coming in and exacerbating and entrenching and deepening a lot of those problems. So what we saw, so immediately after October 7th, and immediately after the genocide really began in all its unbelievable atrocity, crazy killings and bombings, the way in which in South Africa there was clear attempts to target institutions and to ensure that institutions were silent on the genocide. So, for example, I've got behind me a poster, and I don't think you'll see it clearly, but it's a quote by Archbishop Tutu, which is, "If you're neutral in the face of in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of your oppressors." And it's a quote by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And the Tutu Foundation hosted its annual lecture on women and peace in the midst of the genocide. And the Melinda Gates, who was invited by the Tutu Foundation to present the lecture, didn't mention the genocide, didn't call for a ceasefire. So who gets to speak at a really important event like this? How much of strategic manipulation happens to ensure that that genocide is not mentioned? And the similar thing happened with the Mandela lecture. Shortly after that, the Mandela lecture was presented in a way that did not mention again and ask for ceasefire, ending the genocide in Palestine, none of that. So, and it was, so the issue of how these continue to happen, the most recent example of this is in Constitutional Hill, which is the site of the South Africa's Constitutional Court. It's an extremely symbolic venue and a very important space. There was an attempt to hold a Zionist conference at the venue. Fortunately, at this point in time, there's been much greater, quicker awareness and response to that, so that the conference can no longer proceed at Constitutional Hill. But I think that there's this constant tussle for the hearts and minds of South Africans right now. I've got next to me a cushion which has got the slogan "Free Sudan, Congo, Palestine, free us all," and it's because their strategy, the strategy of the Zionists, the strategy has been to really attempt to divide and rule, to say, actually, we should be against each other. Why are we fighting for Palestine? Why are we standing up for Palestine and we are not standing up for Sudan or Congo? And actually, this is not true. There's been solidarity, consistent solidarity, for as long as all of us can remember. So I want to end with simply saying that in terms of what is the important tasks of our solidarity. The one is to make sure that the voices of Palestinian women, Palestinian feminists, are clearly centered in all our work, that reproductive genocide is really understood, and that, and the second is to understand what our resources are. We don't have, we don't have weapons of war, we don't have nuclear power, and we don't wish to have nuclear power. And we don't have the kind of AI surveillance or technology, etc. But and we are not driving the destruction of the climate. These are all the powers that they have. And I think that the question is, what is the power that we have? And I think part of it is to actually identify what is love. Love has been spoken about often here. And I think that issue of love is our state of being. It is our individual and our collective birthright. And it has been reflected on by many people today. But I think the power that then is expressed through is how do we make our strategic connections in those areas that we can begin to challenge both the power of the war economy and the power of the narrative. Thanks very much, and I look forward to listening to others today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Pregs, for coming. Pregs, I would like to ask you if you want to. I'm not sure. I don't know. But would you like to explain to our viewers the way that you were able to influence the anti-apartheid conference a few months ago? Because I think that's one of the strategies that the feminist movement has used historically everywhere, to be able, when there's a conference, to be able to organize and galvanize internationally and locally, to be able to influence, like the social forums, if you remember, historically in Latin America, then have panels about women and women's perspectives on the issues. Would you please take 5 minutes to explain to them how we did it and how you were able to talk in that conference and bring the voices of Palestinian women? Because it's very true, and just let me take 30 more seconds. We ourselves, as elder feminists that have been trying to organize how to support the Palestinian women and our causes around this reproductive genocide, because of the understanding that it is everywhere, we did not come to do something like we're doing today in this webcast until we had the voices of the Palestinian women, because we are also convinced that nothing, how do you say it, Peggy? Nothing about us without us. Yeah. Thank you, Pregs. Would you talk about that?
Sure, Maria. I think that, simply to say that the conference organizers had put together this conference, but what was clearly missing was the voices of Palestinian women and Palestinian feminists. And so the first thing was to write a letter to the convener to raise this as an issue. The second was to try to influence the program to make sure that that Palestinian feminists were incorporated into the way in which it was at a late stage, but there was an attempt. It did happen, and I think then the other was to make sure that in the declaration that we incorporated the key question of the Palestinian, that the voices of Palestinian women must be heard, and that reproductive genocide was incorporated into the final Johannesburg Declaration. And that was also in in the last session, the plenary session, which was really the closing and the way forward session, was to really use that session to highlight this this question, and to also through this process to connect to the Palestinian feminists who were there and who were outside of the conference itself. But I think that this issue of how do we constantly use our voices to reach out, to shift, and to give power to those who should be heard. And I think that's a critical question. How do we constantly ensure whose voices are centered is really important, because the mainstream media, the major, really the power of communication and the power of resources does rest with the Zionist patriarchs in terms of a lot of the ownership of the media, the ownership of the amount of resources that are poured into think tanks, etc. So that was a very important thing, but it was also that it was before this conference and after this conference. It was the matter of also connecting with and the Palestinian Feminist Collective through other events that had happened, and through obviously the Love and Insubordination podcast that had taken place at the end of last year.
Thank you very much. We still have 51 persons that have stayed with us. Pilar meeting had to leave, and some of you, but we have a lot of people, and maybe we want to hear from you, your questions. I'd like to ask Judith and Liliana, who have been following the chat, if there are questions in the chat. And please, for all of you who are with us, ask your questions in the chat so that we can perhaps address them. And while they do that, I would just like to thank you again, and thank Peggy, and thank Paola, and thank Pregs for being here with and bringing your perspectives. And I also, Pilar left, but I told her in the chat personally, not personally, I mean not for everybody, that we will follow up working with her on Genevieve's proposal that on the 25th of November, we can organize another global assembly the way they did it last year, so that we can listen to the voices of the Palestinians and also of many women from around the world. Questions, Judith? Liliana?
I think Liliana's left, but I have a question. And I'm paraphrasing and combining several of the questions in the chat. What's the role of Israelis, particularly Israeli women, who've been working for peace for decades? Is there some way, or do any of you offer solidarity and sisterhood and support for women who are in Israel and are afraid for their own children, even at the same time as they deplore what's happening to the Palestinian children?
I'd happy to talk about that because we've been working with them, like I said, for 22 years, and I've been in this struggle for 50 from when I joined Peace Now, so it's a long time. But as one of them said to me, imagine yourself after 9/11 and the shock everyone was in. And so it's taken time to find the courage to because right away, many in Tel Aviv did try to protest and speak out and got engaged. And the lockdown was fast. The pushback was, they were in jail, they were shut up, they were, so that happened right away, along with a country in trauma. And so I would say right now we're watching sometimes 500,000 people being in the streets of Tel Aviv. I just posted because I felt like in solidarity, I didn't talk about the Jewish women. I've talked a lot about Palestinian women's voices, but the tens of thousands of Jewish women and men across the world that have been using their voices and speaking out from day one. And those that have been in campuses and are really hurt. So in Israel, there is an uprising, but we don't read about it. And let's not forget there was this huge uprising against Netanyahu that he was able to take power even in resistance to. And it's the oppression in Israel is extreme. If we think it's a lot here, it's extreme in Israel.
Thank you. Other questions, Judith?
I'd like to hear if some of the other speakers have any comments on that question, on the question of solidarity or the role of Israeli feminist mothers.
I just want to remember that that for years in the 80s we had mediation among because there is also the chat. If you read in the chat, there are some problematic things in the chat, right? But we had mediation among Israeli women and Palestinian women, and they spoke for years together until Oslo agreements. Oslo marked the moment where it was almost impossible to have dialogues. And the dialogues became that some of us would go to one, then to the others, and try to make them speak through us. So the mothers, I think it's a very important new and old retaking that thread. In the sense that they say our children are going to die, whatever side they are on. And there are, for example, these parents that have lost children in Israeli and in Palestine that travel together in Europe, I don't know there, and they talk about how they were able to rethink their identity through this loss. So I think that this is an important retaking that is important to have. But if you read in the chat, the level of distance now from Israeli perception of themselves and Palestine destruction is terrible. We have to confront the division that this issue has created inside the feminist movement. I don't know where, with whom, but we should be able to talk about that, because this division is very deep, very huge, and very important to understand what feminism is today and how feminists can continue to be, a unification of women in the name of their condition in patriarchy. So I'm stop here, but it's just to show you or us a path of discussion that we have to have the courage, perhaps, also with ourselves to practice.
You, Peggy?
Yeah, I think.
Then Genevieve? And then Genevieve, is there anybody else online? Okay, Peggy and then Genevieve.
I'm glad that Paola has made that point about the divisions within the feminist movement. And I just want to say two things. First of all, there are many feminisms, but one of the, and yes. I was part of that network, the Dawn network from the Global South. And I want to say that one of the things that was most important when Dawn came on the scene and began to talk is to say that feminism is not just about gender relations, that you cannot talk about women outside of the conditions under which they were living. And so Dawn brought in a really strong advocacy or a reminder that we have to do that political economy. We've got to understand the larger framework. And I think that the reason for the division, one of the reasons for the division, two reasons for the division. One is that there really is not an understanding of what is now called an intersectional analysis. But it is more than that, because even in that intersectional analysis, they don't take account of colonial relationships. So unless there's an understanding, which is what I try to introduce here with the talking points, and Pilar made that very, very well, you have to see what is happening to women all over the world, whether they're European women or women from the global south, in the context of a larger issue of this continuing imperialistic project in which patriarchy and white supremacy are fully engaged and support the economic. So the three elements, the capitalism, patriarchy, and white supremacy, those are all interlinked. And that's not been part of the analysis of most feminists. Most feminists do not look at political economy. They do not look at colonialism. They do not look at white supremacy. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the intensity with which, and the tools, the technological tools that are available today to manipulate and to influence political discourse are enormous, And I think these are the reasons why it's inevitable that you're going to have strong divisions if there's not an overarching understanding of what is actually going on, how we are being manipulated. So right here in the chat, I have not been really following the chat, but I've seen enough to understand that in the chat, there are people who are here in order to disrupt this conversation. And Jodie could probably speak to that better than any of us, because she understands the forces that are behind the scene deliberately to derail any solidarity, in fact, among women, for example.
Right.
I see Pregs has a hand up.
Pregs?
Thanks, Genevieve. Thanks, Maria. I think I just wanted to give a little example in relation to this issue of the divisions amongst feminists. And I wanted to do it by giving an example from South Africa during the struggle against apartheid. During the state of emergency around 1985, there was a preparation for the Nairobi conference, the UN Women's Conference in Nairobi, the forward-looking strategies. And at that conference, the delegations that were there representing the US's Ronald Reagan, the President Ronald Reagan, the delegation was led by Maureen O'Regan, and the Britain's Margaret Thatcher, and other Western powers came there with a very clear mandate that the conference was not to discuss apartheid either in South Africa or in Israel. And so the issue of keeping these separate, saying that actually this is politics, it has got nothing to do with women and feminist issues. So I think it's a question really about that challenge to us to be able to make or to connect all the dots, to understand both how oppressive, exploitative, dehumanizing systems work to divide and fragment us, and how important it is for us to actually understand what they're doing and to strategize and to act against that. So I think that in the midst of what we were facing then in 1985, where South Africa detained the most number of children in the world at that time, etc., it is really I think it is a situation today where Palestine, the question of Palestine is people are objecting to the focus on Palestine from a similar position of saying, actually, these are not our issues. Palestine is a feminist issue. It is really exposing it is helping us to connect all the dots. And I think it's the opportunity for the feminist movement to not to remain fragmented, but to be really able to understand and to grasp what this means for us and how it is that if we talk about love, what does that love look like in this moment? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Pregs. Jen, and I want to say something after Jen. Go ahead, Jen.
In Nairobi, there was the official conference and there was also the forum. And in the forum, there was a peace tent which allowed or asked women from opposing sides to talk to each other, and they did that. So the forum was the women's movement voice, while the official conference just towed the official lines. I'm just saying it because I was there. And then I wanted to say also that Women in Black was started in Israel by Israeli women, and they were leading peace discussions and the peace movement for a long time. And we even started in Austin. A Jewish woman in Austin and I started a group of women in Black in Austin that stood in front of the state capitol for 10 or 15 years during the Iraq war, the U.S. war on Iraq. And we were following in the footsteps of the women in Black in Israel. So I know that the Israeli peace movement of women was a world leader, but now I don't know.
Thank you. Well, I want to say something about that because it really is very critical, and thank you for bringing it up. I think that the bottom line, I always look for the bottom lines, and I have had to face this personally, within my family, within my community, and globally. And my question is reproductive genocide unacceptable or not? That is the bottom line because it has to do with everything. And what I ask people who have challenged me is, do you really want your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, whoever you are, to live in a patriarchal, white supremacist, capitalist, extractivist society and planet without anybody to put up anything else against it? Why is that? Because reproductive genocide is about ending the web of life of anybody who is not white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist, and extractivist. Or what are we talking about when we talk about reproductive rights? I come from a generation of freedom fighters of the 70s against dictatorships in Central America. And we knew that the policy of the United States and of our dictatorships at that time was to take the fish off the water in the bowl. And the fish were the freedom fighters. And then that wasn't enough. And then in the 80s, it became about getting the water from the fish so that the fish would die. And the water was us, all of civil society, everybody, resisting or not resisting. And now Palestine is showing where we are going if we don't stop it, because now it's about grabbing the bowl fully, and that's the planet, and grabbing it with their policy. We have to, if we're going to discuss with people who are resisting because of lack of understanding, or even because they think they can get away with it and be part of this, is that the kind of world where you want to live? I can't see any other discussion than that, because that is the state of affairs where we are today. And that's why we say that Palestine is a feminist issue and it's an issue of all of us. And that's why the connection is a connection that has to do with the lives of all of us and all of our peoples.
Our moment to continue about that, because this is too narrow in this moment. So Jodie can tell us, and I think she started to do that, how infection goes. So we have to go back to the infection of minds and see why we accept. Even I have friends, I mean, I know because Italy is divisive. Why? Because we were raised in the respect of Shoah, which was a tragedy. That was an ethnic cleansing, and now it's land. So also the two things are not the same. But we have to start rediscussing these hot points, even if they're so hot in a way, because we try to also to keep them under, to continue to talk to each other. This is one thing. I just to say that we need more time. The third is that I don't remember, I lost, yes, I don't agree with Peggy, the intersectionality from the European white women was the slap in the face that our Black friends gave us, rightly, to say you don't understand a bit because you didn't go through colonialism as victims, but as agents. And so I think that the beginning of the concept of intersectionality in that moment was really instead trying to contemplate the colonialism between us, among us. So all this very important issue, we have to find a context where to confront each other, because I'm sure that in a way we have the opening to listen to each other and to see where we are infected or not. I like this infection word from Jodie, because it's really what it is. And we can accept that we are also infected. It's not the other which is infected. You know, how to combat your own infection that you don't see. So we have to, anyway, just, I refrain myself here because
Jodie is still here?
Jodie had
Huh?
Jodie wrote and said that she had to leave. So she said, sorry, she had to leave. Thank you so much.
Okay, so anybody else?
So I think what we need to do right now is to just have you and Jen, if you have any last words to share, and then maybe Peggy and Pregs and Paola, and then I'll come back on and close us out. So.
Yes, thank you all so much for this great discussion. It's really important, a lot of new information for a lot of us. And it shows that women can think together and come up with new ideas and solutions. For me, the mind disease that Jodie and others of you talked about is really the mind disease of patriarchy and capitalism merged together. And that is bringing us, this mind disease is bringing us to the end of the world, not only by the environmental destruction, but by the destruction of human relations and the way we are savagely killing each other. And this shows a very sick society altogether. And we need to, I'll just talk about my own approach to this a minute. We need to go back to the maternal human those of us who are mothers and have been mothered, and that is everybody, because otherwise you don't survive, to that unilateral giving and receiving that is the basis of human life. And it's not exchange, not quid pro quo. It's not fighting and giving a hit back to the person that gave you a hit. It's not vengeance, it's peace. And that is what we need as the way we heal this mental disease and social disease that we have as patriarchal capitalist peoples that have destroyed so much of the earth and so much of the peoples who were not patriarchal capitalist and are still not, like the indigenous peoples of the world. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Thank you. Peggy?
I really don't have any final words because words have to continue. You have to continue talking.
Yes. Paola?
We have to continue with more time and, space in our minds. Today we had so much, but also knowing that this Palestinian, in a way, is a I don't know, in Italian we say cartina di tornasole, a place where everything goes together and shows us our problems, our way of reacting, our, this world powers also among women, because that is also the story, this power among us. We represent different powers in the world, so we have to confront that. And in this space, we love each other also. Where is Pregs? We have a love for each other from so different places. So I trust that we can tell each other very difficult things because we have this common, Pregs, this common land under us.
And just let me say, Jen, that common thing, which is as mothers, if somehow that could be, I do agree, but the problem that we have that with the mothers is that my child is more important than your child. That's the problem. If we could all recognize each other's child and others' children, that could solve the problem. If we could just do that, find that common humanity. Otherwise, the mothers will be divided against each other because they think their child is more precious than another person's child. They're afraid that their child will be harmed. That's the problem.
So Pregs, do you have some last words?
I just want to say thank you very much to everyone for this discussion, and that hopefully that this will be able to continue in a way that focuses our energies and our attention to what are the specific powers that we have and how do we mobilize those powers that we do have. So we're able to address the ways in which we are being divided, fragmented, the way in which information is being manipulated to divide and fragment us, and what is it that is required to really ensure that there is a very powerful education of what this moment means for feminists, for all of us, and for all of life right now. And I think Maria said it perfectly. That is what we are facing. So thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you, Pregs. We're very happy that you were able to join us. Diane, can I have you put up that slide that tells people how they can continue a conversation? Genevieve and Maria have set up a Google group where you can actually have dialogue in email form. So I'm going to just close this out. If you would like to take a snapshot of this, a screenshot of this, I just want to thank everyone for your attention and time. We go a little bit longer, and I know that the science says that our minds and our bodies really can only pay attention for about 90 minutes. and we have gone twice that amount. So I want to applaud you for actually sticking with us through the end of this session. I'd like to thank Genevieve and Maria for actually bringing this to us, organizing our guests, Lila, Sharif, Pilar, Emitxin, Jodie Evans, and to thank Paola, Melchiori, Peggy Antrobus, and Pregs Govender for your added voices to this conversation. They're very important, and this conversation, I agree, needs to continue. I want to really thank Diane for always being in the background, for ensuring that our text stays up, that we can see each other, and that our recording will be up at our website. I put it in into the chat earlier. I want to thank Liliana, who had to leave, unfortunately, and Judith for watching the chat and the Q&A for the short time that we had for questions. I want to thank all the women in the International Feminists for the Maternal Gift Economy, for all of you, the work that you do, and for coming together to have these very, very challenging and deep conversations. And I want to thank those of you who are present in the room and those of you who are watching the recording. Your heart and your mind, your actions, and every effort that you make in this direction of stopping this war and war everywhere. Deep gratitude from those of us who have the gift to be able to bring these programs out to you. I want you to know that in 2 weeks, we're going to have a salon number 70, and we'll have insight into what Jen is thinking about. I'm very excited to know. We gave us all actually some time off this summer, and Jen has been writing, so we will get to hear her fresh thoughts and ideas. She may bring on a guest, but we will let you know. We'll send out an invitation. And just thank you so much, everyone, and really take care of yourself. I know that this was some difficult and lots of information, but we're women. And it's women who need to do what needs doing for the children who come beyond and for all of us. So yes.
Letecia, please send the chat. Or it's important that we have the chat today.
Yes, the chat will be available on underneath the recording at our website.
Okay.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone. So take really good care. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.